The morning Sarah Chen walked into her observatory, she noticed something wrong with the stars. As Earth's leading astrophysicist, she had spent decades studying the cosmic dance above. But today the universe looked different. Her instruments showed readings that defied everything humanity knew about space. The Kepler array, humanity's most advanced deep space monitoring system, had gone silent overnight. Not just quiet, completely dead. Every single probe, satellite, and monitoring station beyond Neptune had vanished from their tracking systems. Sarah's hands trembled as she ran diagnostic after diagnostic, each one confirming her worst fears. "This isn't possible," she whispered to her empty lab. But the data didn't lie. A perfect sphere of interference surrounded Earth's solar system, cutting them off from the galaxy beyond. No signals could get in or out. No ship could pass through. They were trapped in a cosmic prison. The revelation came 3 days later when the aliens made contact. They called themselves the Hegemony, a collection of 12 advanced species who had ruled the galaxy for millennia. Their message was simple and devastating. Humanity had been quarantined. "Your species shows dangerous potential," the transmission declared in perfect English, somehow translated from their original language. "You advance too quickly, fight too fiercely, and refuse to submit to proper authority. The galaxy has voted. Earth will remain isolated until you prove worthy of joining civilized society." The world erupted in chaos. Governments demanded explanations that didn't exist. Religious leaders proclaimed it the end times. Scientists like Sarah worked frantically to understand the technology that held them prisoner. The barrier was unlike anything in human physics. A wall of energy that turned solid matter into harmless particles and blocked all electromagnetic radiation. But humanity's reaction surprised the hegemony. Instead of despair, Earth's people showed something the aliens hadn't expected: defiance. Within weeks of the quarantine announcement, every major nation had redirected their resources toward a single goal. If they were trapped, they would use that time to grow stronger. The Unity Project began in secret facilities across the globe. Scientists shared research without borders. Military leaders coordinated strategies across former enemy lines. Engineers pushed the boundaries of human technology with desperate innovation. Sarah found herself leading a team of the world's brightest minds, all focused on one impossible task: breaking free. The first breakthrough came from studying the barrier itself. While the aliens had cut off Earth's access to space, they hadn't accounted for human stubbornness. Sarah's team discovered that the energy field wasn't perfect. It had microscopic fluctuations, tiny windows that opened and closed in patterns too fast for normal detection. "It's like they're breathing," Sarah explained to the Unity Council, a group of world leaders who now governed Earth's response. "The barrier pulses every 0.03 seconds. For just a nanosecond, there are gaps we might exploit." The implications were staggering. If they could time their efforts perfectly, they might slip probes through the barrier. Not to escape. That would take more power than Earth could generate, but to gather intelligence about their captors. Dr. Marcus Webb, formerly of NASA, raised his hand during the briefing. "Even if we can get information out, how do we process signals that fast? Human technology isn't built for nanosecond precision." Sarah smiled grimly. "Then we build technology that is. The aliens think they know us, but they've made one crucial mistake. They gave us a challenge." The room fell silent as the weight of her words sank in. Humanity had always thrived when faced with impossible odds. Every great leap forward in human history had come from someone refusing to accept limitations. The wheel, fire, flight, computers, space travel, all born from the simple human belief that there had to be a better way. The hegemony had intended to humble humanity, to force them to beg for acceptance into galactic society. Instead, they had given Earth's people the greatest motivation in human history, proving they belonged among the stars. As Sarah looked around the room at faces filled with determination rather than despair, she realized the aliens had made a fatal error in judgment. They had studied human technology and military capability, but they had failed to understand the human spirit. Humanity didn't just adapt to challenges, they transformed them into opportunities. The quarantine was meant to be Earth's prison. Instead, it would become humanity's forge, where they would craft themselves into something the galaxy had never seen before. The hegemony wanted to test if humans were worthy of the stars. They were about to find out just how worthy humanity could become when they stopped asking for permission and started taking what was theirs by right. The age of human isolation was ending, and the age of human expansion was about to begin. Sarah turned back to her instruments with renewed purpose. The aliens had given them a puzzle to solve, and humanity had never met a puzzle they couldn't crack given enough time and motivation. The barrier surrounding Earth hummed with alien power, but Sarah could already hear something else in its frequency, the sound of humanity's first step toward the stars. The real question wasn't whether they could break free. The question was what they would do to the galaxy once they did. 3 years into the quarantine, humanity had transformed beyond recognition. The Unity Project had grown from a desperate scientific endeavor into a global revolution that touched every aspect of human life. Cities hummed with new energy as fusion reactors powered research facilities that operated around the clock. The old world of competing nations had died the day the aliens announced their judgment. In its place rose something unprecedented in human history. Dr. Elena Vasquez stood in the command center of Luna Base, humanity's first permanent settlement beyond Earth's atmosphere. The quarantine barrier extended well past the moon, giving them room to expand within their cosmic prison. What the aliens had intended as a limitation, humans had turned into an opportunity to perfect their spacefaring capabilities. Status report, Elena called out to her team of international engineers. The command center buzzed with activity as technicians monitored the first test of Project Prometheus, humanity's attempt to weaponize their own sun. Solar collection arrays are at full capacity, reported Yuki Tanaka, Japan's former head of orbital mechanics. We're channeling more energy than any civilization in recorded galactic history has ever harnessed from a single star. The plan was audacious even by human standards. Instead of trying to break through the barrier directly, they would turn their entire solar system into a weapon. Massive collection arrays orbited the sun, gathering its energy and focusing it into precise beams. The technology required had pushed human engineering to its absolute limits, but humanity had advantages the hegemony hadn't expected. Isolation had forced unprecedented cooperation. Without external enemies to fight, humans had turned their legendary competitiveness inward, racing to contribute to their species' survival. The result was technological advancement at a pace that defied galactic norms. Initiating first pulse sequence, announced Dr. James Okafor, formerly of the European Space Agency. His dark fingers flew across holographic controls that would have seemed like magic just 5 years earlier. Target locked on barrier grid section 7 Alpha. The command center fell silent except for the hum of machinery. Through the reinforced windows, they could see Earth hanging in space like a blue jewel, surrounded by the shimmer of alien technology that held them prisoner. But today, that would change. A beam of focused solar energy, containing more power than humanity had used in its entire industrial history, lanced out from their collection array. It struck the barrier with the force of a miniature supernova. For a moment, the alien energy field flickered. Fluctuation detected. Sarah Chen's voice crackled through the communication system from Earth. The barrier integrity dropped by 0.2% for approximately 3 seconds. We're reading massive energy dissipation patterns. Elena allowed herself a smile. It wasn't much, but it was proof that the barrier could be damaged. More importantly, it proved that human stubbornness could overcome alien arrogance. The hegemony had built their prison assuming humans would accept their limitations. They had never imagined a species that would turn their own star into a battering ram. The celebration was short-lived. Within hours of the successful test, the aliens responded. A new transmission pierced the barrier, arriving with technological signatures that made Earth's most advanced computers seem like pocket calculators. Attention. Humans of Earth, the message began, its tone carrying what could only be described as galactic annoyance. Your recent actions constitute a violation of quarantine protocols. Any further attempts to damage the containment field will result in enhanced security measures. Elena laughed as she listened to the message in Luna Base's communication center. Enhanced security measures? They sound like a bureaucratic complaint department. But Dr. Vasquez's humor died as the transmission continued. To demonstrate the futility of resistance, we will provide a demonstration of proper galactic technology. The barrier around Earth suddenly blazed with new energy patterns. Instead of the steady hum humanity had grown accustomed to, it now pulsed with rhythmic waves that seemed to sing with alien mathematics. More disturbing were the new objects that appeared within the quarantine zone. massive structures that hadn't been there moments before. Materializing objects inside a closed energy field, whispered James, his engineering mind struggling to process what he was seeing. They're manipulating matter and energy on a scale we can't even measure. The alien demonstration ships, for that's what they clearly were, dwarfed humanity's largest constructions. Each one was the size of a small moon, their surfaces covered in geometric patterns that hurt to look at directly. They positioned themselves at strategic points around Earth's orbital plane, their very presence a message. This is what you're trying to fight. But instead of intimidating humanity, the display had the opposite effect. Elena watched as her team's expressions shifted from awe to calculation. Humans had always been pattern recognition specialists, and they were already analyzing the alien ships for weaknesses. Look at the energy signatures, Yuki pointed out, her fingers dancing across sensor displays. They're not generating power, they're storing it. Those ships are batteries, not independent vessels, which means they have limitations, James added, his earlier dismay replaced by the methodical thinking that had gotten humanity this far. Batteries run down. Energy dissipates. Everything follows conservation laws, even alien technology. Elena felt the familiar fire of human determination burning in her chest. The aliens had just made their second crucial mistake. Their first had been underestimating human adaptability. Their second was giving humanity something new to study. Send a message to all Unity Project facilities, she ordered. New priority. Figure out how those ships work. Every sensor we have goes toward analyzing their technology. If they want to wave their superiority in our faces, we'll use it as a learning opportunity. The next few weeks transformed the quarantine from a prison into the galaxy's most intensive research laboratory. Humanity studied the alien demonstration ships with an obsession that bordered on religious fervor. They mapped energy patterns, analyzed material compositions, and reverse-engineered technologies that were millennia beyond human understanding. And slowly, impossibly, they began to understand. Human minds, evolved for survival and adaptation, proved remarkably good at finding patterns in alien mathematics. What the hegemony saw as incomprehensible superiority, humans saw as a particularly complex engineering problem. Elena stood again in the Luna Base Command Center, but this time her expression held something that would have terrified the hegemony if they had understood human facial expressions. It was the look of a species that had just figured out how to level the playing field. Project Icarus is ready for implementation, she announced to the assembled representatives of humanity's greatest minds. If they want to demonstrate their technology, we'll demonstrate ours. Time to show the galaxy what happens when you give humans a challenge and 3 years to think about it. The day Project Icarus launched marked humanity's declaration of war against the impossible. Captain Maria Santos stood on the bridge of humanity's first true warship, a vessel that existed because humans had done what the galaxy considered unthinkable. They had learned to think like their captors while remaining utterly human. The Miami ship beneath her feet hummed with hybrid technology that married human innovation with stolen alien principles. They called it Defiance, and it represented 5 years of the most intensive research and development program in human history. Every component had been built from materials found within their quarantine zone, every system designed to exploit weaknesses in hegemony technology that the aliens didn't know they had. All stations report ready, announced Lieutenant Commander Zhang Wei, formerly of the Chinese Space Navy. The international crew that operated Defiance spoke a dozen languages, but thought with one mind, the focused determination of a species that refused to accept limitations. Maria studied the tactical display showing the alien demonstration ships that had haunted Earth's orbital space for 2 years. The massive vessels continued their lazy patrol patterns, their energy signatures unchanged. They had grown complacent, assuming human weapons could never threaten them. They were about to learn how dangerous assumptions could be. Remember, Maria addressed her crew over the ship's communication system. We're not trying to destroy them. We're sending a message. Humanity doesn't ask for permission anymore. The first stage of Project Icarus was deceptively simple. Defiance approached the nearest alien vessel, broadcasting standard diplomatic frequencies that requested communication. The massive ship ignored them. as it had ignored all human attempts at contact for years. But this time, humanity wasn't really trying to talk. Initiating quantum resonance mapping, reported Dr. Chen Lu, the physicist who had figured out how to turn human stubbornness into a weapon. Their shields are operating on predictable harmonic frequencies. Just like we thought, they're using technology so advanced, they never considered someone might find a simple workaround. The alien ships protected themselves with energy barriers that could deflect planet-killing weapons, but they had never encountered humans, who specialized in finding the one weird trick that made impossible things possible. Instead of trying to overpower the shields, humanity had learned to vibrate at the same frequency, becoming temporarily invisible to alien sensors. Phase shift complete, Chen announced. We're now quantum synchronized with their defensive matrix. For all practical purposes, we don't exist to their security systems. Maria watched as Defiance slipped through the alien ship's shields like a ghost passing through a wall. The massive vessel's weapon systems didn't react because they couldn't detect the threat. It was a perfect illustration of the gap between alien sophistication and human cleverness. Deploying surprise package, she ordered. What humanity had learned during their forced isolation was that alien technology, for all its advancement, followed certain predictable patterns. The hegemony had been building the same types of ships for thousands of years, using the same energy principles, the same defensive strategies. They had achieved perfection, and perfection, humans had discovered, was another word for predictability. The surprise package was humanity's gift to their captors, a quantum virus that wouldn't destroy the alien ship, but would rewrite its programming languages. Instead of patrolling Earth's orbital space as a symbol of alien dominance, the vessel would begin broadcasting something else entirely. Virus deployment successful, reported communications. Officer Sarah Kim. The alien ship's transmission arrays are now under our control. The results were immediate and spectacular. The massive alien vessel, which had spent 2 years broadcasting subtle intimidation signals, suddenly began transmitting something very different. In every language spoken on Earth and harmonics that could be heard from orbit, it began playing humanity's greatest hits. Rock music, classical symphonies, jazz improvisations, pop songs, the cultural output of a species that had learned to find beauty in chaos and meaning in struggle. But more than entertainment, the music carried a message encoded in its mathematical structures, a message that would be understood by any sufficiently advanced civilization. The message was simple. We are still here. We are still human. And we are not afraid. The reaction from the hegemony was swift and alarmed. Within hours, all 12 alien demonstration ships had increased their energy output and begun active scanning procedures. The lazy confidence of their patrol patterns was replaced by the sharp movements of a predator that had suddenly realized it might be prey. New transmissions flooded Earth's communication networks, but these weren't the bureaucratic announcements humanity had grown accustomed to. These carried the sharp edges of barely controlled anger. How? The single-word transmission came from multiple alien sources simultaneously, each one using different technological principles to pierce the quarantine barrier. How did primitive humans access our ship systems? How did you penetrate barriers that have held civilizations for millennia? Maria smiled as she read the intercepted messages in Defiance's command center. The aliens were scared, and scared beings made mistakes. More importantly, they had just revealed something crucial. They had been monitoring other civilizations the same way they monitored Earth. The quarantine wasn't unique to humanity. Send a response, she ordered. Use their own communication protocol so they know we figured out their technology. The message Defiance transmitted was crafted by Earth's best diplomats and psychologists, designed to plant seeds of doubt in alien minds that had never encountered a species like humanity. You asked how we did it. The transmission began. The answer is simple: we learned. You showed us your ships, your barriers, your technology, thinking it would humble us. Instead, you gave us textbooks. You assumed we would despair at our limitations. Instead, we used those limitations to focus our creativity. You believed your superiority was absolute. We believed it was temporary. The message continued with mathematical proofs that demonstrated humanity's growing understanding of hegemony technology, cultural analysis that showed how alien thinking patterns had become predictable to human minds, and tactical assessments that suggested Earth's population had used their isolation time more effectively than their captors had imagined possible. But the core of the message was profoundly human. We don't seek to destroy you. We seek to join you, but we will join as equals, not as supplicants. The choice is yours: negotiate with us as peers, or continue to underestimate us at your own risk. The alien response took 3 days to arrive, and when it did, it carried undertones that human linguists immediately recognized as fear mixed with grudging respect. A delegation will arrive to assess your development. Do not mistake this for acceptance. You remain quarantined until the Hegemony Council makes a final determination about your species' worthiness. Maria leaned back in her command chair, watching Earth turn slowly in the view screen. The blue planet looked the same as it had 6 years ago when the quarantine began, but humanity had changed beyond recognition. They had learned to think on galactic scales while retaining their essential humanity. They had mastered alien technology while never forgetting that the greatest weapon in their arsenal was the human refusal to give up. Set course for Earth, she ordered. We've got delegates to prepare for, and I have a feeling they're going to get a very different reception than they're expecting. The hegemony thought they were coming to judge humanity. They didn't realize that humanity was about to judge them right back. And humans, unlike their galactic neighbors, had spent thousands of years learning how to deal with arrogant bullies who thought might made right. The real negotiations were about to begin. The hegemony delegation arrived with all the pomp and circumstance of beings who had ruled the galaxy for millennia. Their ship materialized within Earth's quarantine zone without apparent effort, a crystalline structure the size of Manhattan that seemed to bend light around itself in impossible ways. It was meant to be a display of overwhelming technological superiority. Instead, it became humanity's first real look at their captors. Ambassador Rebecca Huang stood in the newly constructed diplomatic facility orbiting Earth, watching as the alien vessel approached. As humanity's chief negotiator, she had spent the last year studying every scrap of intelligence they had gathered about hegemony culture, psychology, and social structure. What she had learned would have surprised the aliens if they had known humans were capable of such analysis. Remember, she addressed her team through the facility's communication system, they're expecting primitives. Give them what they expect, then show them what we really are. The diplomatic station itself was a masterpiece of human misdirection. From the outside, it appeared to be built with crude human technology: metal plates, chemical rockets, primitive life support systems. The aliens would see exactly what they expected to see from a recently spacefaring species. What they wouldn't see were the quantum computers hidden in the walls, the gravitic manipulators disguised as structural supports, or the weapon systems that could crack moons but looked like communication arrays. Humanity had learned the value of letting opponents underestimate them. The hegemony delegation consisted of representatives from 3 species that humanity had never seen before. The primary ambassador was a being that resembled a cross between a praying mantis and a crystal formation. Its thoughts transmitted through harmonic frequencies that required special equipment to understand. The second was something that looked like living liquid metal, constantly shifting and reforming its shape. The third defied easy description. It existed partially in dimensions humans couldn't perceive directly. Greetings, humans of Earth, the crystal mantis being transmitted in perfectly clear English. I am Resonance of Distant Stars, speaking for the Hegemony Council. We have come to evaluate your species' development during your period of education. Rebecca stepped forward, wearing a simple blue suit that had been carefully designed to appear non-threatening while projecting quiet confidence. Behind her stood a team of Earth's finest minds, each one chosen not just for their expertise, but for their ability to think several moves ahead. Welcome to Earth space, Rebecca replied in perfectly accented hegemony standard, a language humans weren't supposed to know. I am Ambassador Rebecca Huang, speaking for the United Species of, Terra. We appreciate you taking time from your busy schedule of galactic management to visit us. Personally, the slight pause in the alien delegation's responses told Rebecca everything she needed to know. They had expected broken English, maybe some primitive attempts at translation. They hadn't expected humans to have mastered their language so completely that they were using grammatical structures that conveyed subtle diplomatic insults. You have learned our language, observed the liquid metal being, its voice like mercury flowing over glass. This is unexpected. We've learned many things during our isolation, Rebecca replied smoothly. Languages, technologies, cultural patterns. You'd be surprised how much you can figure out when you put your mind to it. Please join us for the formal presentations. We've prepared something special. The conference room had been designed to human psychological specifications, with subtle lighting and acoustic patterns that would make the aliens slightly uncomfortable, without them realizing why. It was a technique borrowed from corporate boardrooms and refined through years of studying alien psychological profiles. Before we begin, Resonance of Distant Stars announced, we must establish the parameters of this evaluation. Your species has demonstrated concerning aggressive tendencies and technological development beyond expected parameters. The hegemony requires assurance that you will integrate peacefully into galactic civilization. Rebecca smiled, the expression carefully calculated to convey human warmth while hinting at hidden depths. Of course, we understand the hegemony has certain standards. Perhaps we could begin by reviewing your own integration policies. We've done some research into your historical approaches to new species. The request seemed reasonable, but Rebecca knew it would put the aliens in an uncomfortable position. The hegemony's historical records contained information they preferred not to discuss. Details about species that had been integrated in ways that amounted to cultural extinction. That is, not necessary. The partially dimensional being replied, its words seeming to come from multiple directions at once. We are here to evaluate humans, not to justify our methods. Oh, but we've already done our own evaluation, Rebecca said pleasantly. Dr. Martinez, would you please share our findings? Dr. Carlos Martinez, formerly of the University of Barcelona's Xenopsychology Department, stepped forward with a holographic display that materialized in the center of the room. The technology was clearly beyond what the aliens expected humans to possess, but that was just the beginning of their surprises. Over the past 6 years, we've analyzed hegemony behavior patterns, communication protocols, and historical records that were inadvertently accessible through your monitoring systems. Carlos began. What we found was interesting. The holographic display showed a 3-dimensional map of the galaxy, with different colored regions marking various alien territories. But instead of the stable, peaceful civilization the hegemony claimed to represent, the map revealed something else entirely. It appears that the hegemony maintains control through a combination of technological superiority and cultural suppression. Carlos continued, his tone academic but with an underlying edge. Species that join your alliance undergo what you term harmonization, a process that eliminates their unique cultural and technological development in favor of standardized hegemony norms. The alien delegates had gone very still, their various forms of communication equipment registering elevated stress responses that human sensors were carefully monitoring. Furthermore, Carlos added, our analysis suggests that the hegemony has been stagnant for approximately 4,000 years. No significant technological advancement, no cultural evolution, no creative development. You've achieved stability at the cost of growth. Rebecca watched the aliens process this information with the satisfaction of a chess player revealing a carefully prepared gambit. Humanity had spent their quarantine time doing more than just developing weapons and learning alien languages. They had been studying their captors with the same intensity that had allowed them to survive and thrive on Earth for millennia. This evaluation is unacceptable, Resonance of Distant Stars declared, its harmonic frequencies sharp with anger. You are the subjects being evaluated, not the evaluators. Are we? Rebecca asked quietly. Because from our perspective, you've been testing us for 6 years while we've been testing you right back. And we have some concerns about the results. She gestured and the holographic display changed to show detailed analyses of hegemony technology, social structures, and strategic weaknesses. It was information that no quarantined species should have been able to gather, presented with a thoroughness that suggested human intelligence capabilities far beyond what the aliens had anticipated. You see, Rebecca continued, her voice taking on the tone of a teacher explaining something to particularly slow students, we've been wondering whether the hegemony represents the kind of galactic civilization we want to join. Your technological stagnation, cultural homogenization policies, and tendency to solve problems through isolation rather than cooperation suggest a governing body that has lost touch with the qualities that drive true advancement. The conference room fell silent except for the subtle harmonics of alien stress responses. For the first time in millennia, representatives of the hegemony were faced with a species that not only refused to be intimidated but had turned the evaluation process into a mutual assessment. "You're judging us," the liquid metal being said slowly, as if the concept was difficult to process. "We're evaluating whether we want to be part of your organization," Rebecca confirmed. "After all, membership should be a choice, shouldn't it? And before we make that choice, we need to know if the hegemony represents our values or just another form of tyranny wearing a prettier mask." The aliens exchanged communications in frequencies humans weren't supposed to be able to monitor, but Rebecca's team was recording and translating every word. What they heard confirmed humanity's worst suspicions about their captors and best hopes for their own future. The hegemony was afraid. For the first time in thousands of years, they had encountered a species that might be their equal, and they had no idea what to do about it. The negotiations had been going for 3 days when everything changed. Ambassador Rebecca Huang was in the middle of presenting humanity's conditions for potential hegemony membership when alarms began blaring throughout the diplomatic station. The alien delegates froze in whatever passed for surprise among their species, while Rebecca's team moved with the practiced efficiency of people who had spent years preparing for this exact moment. "Ma'am," Lieutenant Sarah Park's voice crackled through the communication system, "we're detecting massive energy buildups throughout the quarantine zone. It looks like the hegemony is preparing to activate some kind of enhanced containment protocol." Rebecca didn't miss the way the alien delegates suddenly became very interested in their personal communication devices. She also didn't miss the fact that none of them seemed surprised by the development. "Resonance of distant stars," she said coolly. "Would you care to explain why your people are powering up what appears to be a planet-killing weapon while we're in the middle of peaceful negotiations?" The crystal mantis being's harmonic frequencies carried what human xenopsychologists had learned to recognize as embarrassment, mixed with determination. "The Hegemony Council has concerns about the direction of these discussions. They have authorized enhanced containment procedures to ensure galactic security." "Enhanced containment," Rebecca repeated, her voice deadly calm. "You mean you're planning to sterilize Earth rather than admit you might have equals in this galaxy?" The liquid metal being flowed into a more compact shape, a posture that indicated defensive preparation. "Your species has demonstrated capabilities that exceed acceptable parameters for integration. The Council has determined that continued human development poses an unacceptable risk to galactic stability." Rebecca felt a familiar fire burning in her chest, the same feeling that had driven humanity to survive ice ages, build civilizations, and reach for the stars despite every obstacle the universe threw at them. But this time, the feeling was backed by 6 years of preparation and the combined determination of an entire species that had learned to think on galactic scales. "Dr. Chen," she said quietly into her communicator, "please initiate Protocol Omega." The aliens didn't understand the reference, but they would soon. Protocol Omega was humanity's final card, the one they had hoped never to play but had spent years perfecting just in case their captors proved to be exactly what they appeared to be, bullies who destroyed what they couldn't control. "Enhanced containment authorized. Resonance of distant stars announced, apparently receiving new instructions through channels humans weren't supposed to be able to monitor. This delegation is terminating negotiations. Prepare for final sterilization sequence." "I don't think so," Rebecca said simply. The first sign that something had gone wrong with the hegemony's plans came when their enhanced containment weapons failed to activate. The massive energy buildups that had been detected throughout the quarantine zone suddenly dissipated as if they had never existed. The alien technology that had held Earth prisoner for 6 years flickered and died like candles in a hurricane. "Impossible," the partially dimensional being declared, its voice carrying harmonics of disbelief. "Our systems are quantum encrypted and protected by barriers that have never been breached." "We're protected," Rebecca corrected gently. "You see, you made the same mistake with your technology that you made with your diplomacy. You assumed that advanced meant invulnerable. But humans have a saying, every system is perfectly designed to produce the results it produces. And your systems were designed by beings who hadn't faced a real challenge in thousands of years. The truth was simpler and more devastating than the aliens could have imagined. While they had been monitoring Earth for signs of dangerous development, humanity had been doing something the hegemony had never encountered before. They had been learning to think like their captors while remaining fundamentally human. Every quarantine barrier, every monitoring system, every piece of hegemony technology in Earth's solar system had been quietly infiltrated and subverted. Not through brute force or superior technology, but through the one advantage humans had always possessed: the ability to find patterns and exploit weaknesses that others considered insignificant. Protocol Omega is a quantum virus, designed specifically to target hegemony control systems, Rebecca explained as the alien delegates watched their communication devices go dead one by one. We've been uploading it into your networks every time you made contact with us. Every transmission, every scan, every attempt to monitor our development gave us another pathway into your systems. The implications were staggering. If humans could infiltrate hegemony technology this completely within a quarantine zone, what could they do with access to the galaxy-wide network that connected all 12 member species? You have just declared war on the entire hegemony, resonance of distant stars transmitted, its harmonic frequencies sharp with something humans had never heard from an alien before: fear. No, Rebecca replied firmly. We've just leveled the playing field. War is what you were planning when you decided to sterilize 8 billion innocent people, rather than admit you might have been wrong about us. She gestured, and the conference room's displays activated to show the current status of hegemony forces throughout the galaxy. It was information no quarantine species should have been able to access, but humanity had never been good at accepting limitations. Your enhanced containment protocol was designed to make an example of Earth, Rebecca continued. Show the galaxy what happens to species that don't accept hegemony authority without question. But here's what you didn't consider. We've been sharing our discoveries with others. The displays showed something that made the alien delegates recoil in whatever passed for horror among their species. Throughout the galaxy, other quarantined worlds were beginning to emit signals that matched Earth's transmission patterns. The virus humanity had developed wasn't just affecting hegemony technology in Earth's solar system. It was spreading through their quantum networks to every system they controlled. You see, Rebecca explained with the patience of a teacher addressing particularly slow students, humans aren't the only species you've underestimated. We've been in contact with 47 other quarantined civilizations, sharing information and coordinating our efforts. Today isn't just Earth's Liberation Day, it's the day the galaxy discovers what happens when you give intelligent species a common enemy and enough time to prepare. The liquid metal being was fluctuating rapidly between different shapes, a sign of extreme agitation. The Council will never accept this. They will mobilize the full military power of 12 species against your rebellion. Will they? Rebecca asked mildly. Because our analysis suggests that the hegemony's military power depends entirely on technological superiority and the assumption that their enemies will fight fair. But we've spent 6 years learning to fight smart instead of fair, and we've taught our methods to every species you've ever quarantined. She stood up, her movements carrying the quiet confidence of someone who held all the winning cards in a game their opponents had never learned to play. Here's what's going to happen, Rebecca announced. You're going to return to the Hegemony Council and explain that the age of unquestioned authority is over. The quarantined species are free, and we're not asking for permission to join galactic civilization. We're taking our place in it as equals. And if we refuse? The partially dimensional being asked. Rebecca smiled, and for the first time the expression carried no warmth at all, just the cold determination of a species that had learned to survive against impossible odds and had decided they were done being anyone's victim. Then you'll discover why humanity spent 6 years learning to build weapons instead of sending surrender messages. The choice is yours, but choose quickly. Every second you waste gives our virus more time to spread through your networks. The alien delegates looked at each other through whatever senses they used for communication, and Rebecca could practically see the moment they realized the truth. The hegemony wasn't dealing with a primitive species begging for acceptance. They were facing something they had never encountered before, a coalition of civilizations that had learned to turn oppression into opportunity and isolation into strength. The galaxy was about to change, and for the first time in millennia, the change wasn't going to be dictated by the Hegemony Council. 6 months after the liberation of Earth, Commander Elena Vasquez stood on the bridge of the New Horizon, humanity's first interstellar vessel. As it dropped out of faster-than-light travel in the Kepler 442 system, what they found there would have been impossible under the old galactic order. But the galaxy was learning to expect the impossible from the coalition of former quarantine worlds. "Sensor sweep complete," reported Lieutenant James Park, his voice carrying barely contained excitement. "Ma'am, you need to see this." The main display activated to show a sight that defied everything the hegemony had taught the galaxy about proper civilization development. Instead of the primitive, struggling colony they had expected to find, Kepler 442b hosted a thriving multi-species settlement that buzzed with activity. Elegant spires of crystalline architecture rose from verdant valleys, while orbital platforms danced in perfect harmony around the planet. Ships from dozens of different species moved in coordinated patterns that spoke of cooperation rather than conquest. Most remarkably, the energy signatures indicated technology that was advancing at rates the galaxy hadn't seen in millennia. "It's beautiful," whispered Dr. Sarah Kim, the xenobiologist who had volunteered for humanity's first diplomatic mission to the liberated worlds. "Look at how they've integrated their different architectural styles. That's not just coexistence, that's genuine collaboration." Elena nodded, feeling a deep satisfaction that had nothing to do with military victory and everything to do with watching intelligence flourish when freed from artificial constraints. This was what the galaxy could become when species were allowed to grow and learn from each other instead of being forced into standardized conformity. "Incoming transmission," announced Communications Officer Wang Li. "Multiple sources, different species. They're welcoming us home." The phrase sent a chill down Elena's spine. Home. For 6 years, Earth had been isolated, cut off from what should have been their galactic family. Now, for the first time, they were being welcomed not as supplicants or threats, but as equals among equals. The transmission resolved into a holographic display showing representatives from the Kepler 442 coalition, 7 species who had been quarantined at different times throughout hegemony history, but had found each other during the Great Liberation. Their spokesperson was a being that looked like a cross between a butterfly and a tree, its bioluminescent patterns pulsing in what humans had learned to recognize as expressions of joy. "Greetings, humans of Terra," the being transmitted in perfectly clear English. "I am Growing Light of Dawn, speaking for the Coalition of Free Worlds. We have been expecting you." Elena stepped forward, wearing the simple blue uniform that had become the standard for Earth's diplomatic corps. Behind her stood a carefully chosen team that represented humanity's diversity: scientists, artists, engineers, and philosophers from every continent on Earth. "Thank you for the welcome," Elena replied in Coalition Standard, the hybrid language that had emerged from the liberated world's need to communicate across species barriers. "We're honored to finally meet our neighbors face to face." "The honor is ours," Growing Light of Dawn responded, its patterns shifting to colors that conveyed deep respect. "Your species' breakthrough made all of this possible. The quantum virus you developed didn't just free our worlds, it gave us the tools to break free from our own limitations." The truth was both simpler and more profound than the hegemony had ever understood. The coalition species hadn't just used humanity's virus to escape their quarantine zones, they had used the freedom to begin the most intensive period of cooperative development the galaxy had ever seen. Without the hegemony's standardization requirements, each species had been free to pursue their natural strengths while learning from others. "We've prepared something special for your arrival," Growing Light of Dawn continued. "A demonstration of what free minds can accomplish when they work together instead of in isolation." The main display shifted to show the interior of what appeared to be a massive laboratory complex that spanned multiple continents on Kepler 442b. But as Elena watched, she realized it wasn't just a laboratory, it was something unprecedented in galactic history. "A collaborative research network," Dr. Kim breathed, her scientific mind immediately grasping the implications. "They've linked their best researchers across species barriers, sharing knowledge in real time. The rate of advancement must be exponential." "It is," Growing Light of Dawn confirmed, its patterns now showing what humans had learned to recognize as pride mixed with anticipation. "In 6 months, we have made more technological and cultural progress than the hegemony achieved in centuries." and we're just getting started. Elena felt a familiar stirring in her chest, the same feeling that had driven humanity to reach for the stars despite every obstacle. But this time it was magnified by the knowledge that they weren't alone in their hunger for growth and discovery. "There's more," Growing Light of Dawn added. "We've received messages from former hegemony worlds, core species who are beginning to question their own limitations. It appears that our liberation has inspired others to examine their own situations. The implications were staggering. The hegemony had maintained control for millennia, through the assumption that their way was the only way, that stability was more important than growth. That order was preferable to the chaos of free development. But the success of the coalition worlds was proving that assumption wrong in the most dramatic way possible. "Show them the Prometheus project," suggested another being in the coalition, this one resembling a living geometric pattern that shifted through dimensions human eyes could barely follow. Growing Light of Dawn's patterns shifted to what Elena recognized as excitement mixed with anticipation. "The Prometheus project represents our combined efforts to solve the galaxy's greatest challenges. We're working on technologies that could transform entire star systems, communication networks that could span the galaxy instantly, and social structures that could allow thousands of species to cooperate as equals." Elena's tactical mind immediately grasped the strategic implications. The coalition wasn't just developing advanced technology, they were creating the foundations for a completely different kind of galactic civilization. One based on cooperation rather than domination, growth rather than stagnation, diversity rather than conformity. "The hegemony won't allow this to continue," she said quietly. "They'll see it as a threat to everything they've built." "They already do," Growing Light of Dawn replied, its patterns showing grim determination. "We've detected massive military buildups in their core systems. They're preparing for what they call a restoration campaign. Their plan to forcibly reintegrate the liberated worlds and eliminate what they term dangerous developmental variants." Elena felt the old fire burning in her chest. The same determination that had driven humanity to survive ice ages and reach for the stars. But this time it was backed by something more powerful than human stubbornness. It was backed by the combined will of dozens of species, who had tasted freedom and refused to give it up. "Then, we'd better be ready for them," she said simply. "Because they're about to learn the difference between ruling through fear and earning respect through cooperation." The coalition had 6 months to prepare for the hegemony's response, and Elena intended to make sure those 6 months counted. The galaxy was about to witness something it had never seen before, a war between those who sought to preserve the status quo and those who dared to imagine something better. And for the first time in galactic history, the forces of change had the advantage. The Battle of Sagittarius Arm would be remembered as the day the galaxy changed forever. Admiral Maria Santos stood on the bridge of the coalition flagship Unity, watching as the largest fleet in galactic history prepared for the most important battle in cosmic history. What had begun 7 years ago as humanity's quarantine had evolved into something the hegemony had never anticipated, a complete transformation of galactic civilization. "Final status report," Maria called out to her bridge crew, a mix of humans and coalition species who had learned to work together with an efficiency that amazed even themselves. "Coalition forces report ready across all sectors," announced Commander Zakth, a crystalline being whose species had been quarantined for refusing to abandon their mathematics-based philosophy. 347 worlds, 73 species, and approximately 4 billion volunteer defenders. The numbers were staggering, but Maria knew they told only part of the story. This wasn't just a military conflict. It was a clash between two completely different visions of what galactic civilization could become. The hegemony represented 10,000 years of enforced stability, standardization, and control. The coalition represented something that had never existed before: voluntary cooperation between equals. "Hegemony fleet composition?" she asked. 12 primary battle groups, one for each member species, reported Lieutenant Sarah Chen, her human eyes enhanced with coalition technology that allowed her to process tactical information at superhuman speeds. Approximately 2,000 vessels of various classifications. They're using traditional hegemony battle doctrine, overwhelming force applied to specific targets. Maria smiled grimly. Traditional doctrine was exactly what the Coalition had been counting on. The hegemony had spent millennia perfecting the art of crushing resistance through superior technology and coordinated assault. They had never faced an enemy that had spent years studying their methods and developing specifically designed countermeasures. Begin Phase 1, she ordered. What happened next would have been impossible under the old galactic order. Instead of meeting the hegemony fleet in traditional battle formation, the Coalition forces seemed to simply disappear. Ships that had been clearly visible on sensors moments before faded into quantum uncertainty, their positions becoming probability clouds rather than fixed coordinates. Impossible, transmitted resonance of distant stars from the hegemony flagship Eternal Order. No known technology can achieve fleet-wide quantum phase shifting. Then I guess you don't know as much as you thought, Maria replied pleasantly over the open communication channel. You spent so long perfecting your technology that you forgot how to innovate. We spent 7 years learning how to think differently. The truth was both elegant and devastating. While the hegemony had been preparing for a conventional fleet engagement, the Coalition had been developing something unprecedented, coordinated quantum warfare that treated entire battle groups as single entities operating across multiple dimensional phases simultaneously. Coalition, Battle Group 7, initiate resonance cascade, Maria ordered. The first sign that the hegemony was in serious trouble came when their own weapons began targeting their own ships. The quantum virus that humanity had originally developed to escape quarantine had evolved into something far more sophisticated, a tactical system that could hijack enemy targeting computers and turn their technological superiority against them. Our weapons are non-responsive, came frantic transmissions from multiple hegemony vessels. Targeting systems are locked onto friendly units. We cannot engage the enemy without destroying ourselves. Maria watched the tactical display with the satisfaction of someone who had helped plan every detail of this moment. The Coalition wasn't trying to destroy the hegemony fleet. They were demonstrating the futility of using force against beings who had learned to think cooperatively rather than competitively. Phase 2, she announced. The second phase of the Coalition's strategy was even more devastating than the first. Instead of attacking hegemony ships, Coalition forces began broadcasting something that cut deeper than any weapon, information. Every member of the hegemony fleet suddenly found their communication systems flooded with data they had never been allowed to see. Historical records showing what their civilizations had been like before hegemony integration. Scientific discoveries that had been suppressed for not fitting standard doctrine. Cultural achievements that had been erased in the name of harmonization. What is this? Demanded the liquid metal being that served as the hegemony's military coordinator. These records are classified beyond your clearance levels. Classified by whom? Asked Growing Light of Dawn, speaking for the Coalition from the bridge of a ship that seemed to exist in multiple dimensions simultaneously. By the same council that told our species we weren't worthy of freedom? By the same authority that decided diversity was dangerous and growth was threatening? The information bombardment was having its intended effect. Throughout the hegemony fleet, crew members were discovering truths about their own species that their leaders had hidden for millennia. They were learning about artistic traditions that had been banned, scientific theories that had been suppressed, and philosophical concepts that had been declared heretical. More importantly, they were seeing what the Coalition worlds had accomplished in just 7 years of freedom. Technological advances that dwarfed anything the hegemony had achieved in centuries. Cultural renaissance that had produced art, music, and literature that spoke to the deepest aspirations of intelligent life. Social structures that allowed dozens of species to work together as equals while maintaining their unique identities. This is what we fought so hard to deny you, Maria announced to the hegemony fleet. Not the right to destroy, but the right to create. Not the power to conquer, but the freedom to grow. Not the authority to rule, but the opportunity to cooperate. The response from the hegemony leadership was swift and desperate. All units, ignore the propaganda transmissions. Focus on primary objectives. The Coalition must be contained before their infection spreads further. But it was too late. Throughout the hegemony fleet, individual ships were beginning to break formation. Not to flee, but to approach Coalition vessels with signals that had not been heard in the galaxy for thousands of years. Requests for peaceful communication. Hegemony vessel. Crystal harmony. Requesting permission to discuss terms, came a transmission that made Maria's heart soar with hope. Hegemony vessel, flowing thought. Requesting information about coalition membership requirements. Hegemony vessel, perfect order. Requesting asylum for crew members who wish to defect. The great battle that was supposed to determine the fate of galactic civilization was turning into something unprecedented, a mass awakening that rippled through the ranks of the hegemony's own forces. This cannot be allowed to continue. Resonance of distant stars transmitted with harmonic sharp with desperation. All remaining loyal units prepare to implement Final Protocol. Maria felt a chill as she recognized the reference. Final Protocol was the hegemony's ultimate weapon, a reality rewriting device that could literally erase entire star systems from existence. It was a weapon of last resort that they had never used because its deployment would destabilize the fabric of space-time itself. They're willing to destroy the galaxy rather than admit they were wrong, she said quietly to her bridge crew. Then we stop them, replied Commander Zacht with the calm certainty of a being whose species had faced extinction before and refused to yield. Coalition forces, implement Omega contingency, Maria ordered. The final phase of the coalition's strategy was the most audacious of all. Instead of trying to prevent the hegemony from deploying their reality weapon, they would let them activate it, and then demonstrate the difference between power used to destroy and power used to create. As the hegemony's final protocol charged to activation, something extraordinary happened. Every coalition ship, every liberated world, every free mind in the galaxy began working in perfect synchronization. Not through authoritarian control, but through voluntary cooperation guided by shared purpose. The reality rewriting energy that was meant to erase the coalition from existence instead encountered something the hegemony had never imagined, a quantum field, generated by billions of minds working together toward a common goal. Instead of destruction, the weapon became a tool of transformation. Impossible, whispered resonance of distant stars as sensors throughout the galaxy registered the same impossible reading. Possible, Maria replied with quiet satisfaction. When you get enough minds working together toward something better, instead of competing to control what already exists, the energy meant to destroy the coalition had instead rewritten the fundamental laws governing galactic civilization. The barriers that had kept species isolated were dissolving. The technologies that had been hoarded by the few were becoming available to all. The knowledge that had been classified was becoming public domain. Most importantly, the fear that had kept intelligent species from reaching their full potential was being replaced by hope.